Hey everyone, my name is Caleb Keller. I was supposed to be able to present at the Rasa Dev Summit this past week, but my flights didn't work out and I had a very fun day trying to get to San Francisco. Anyway, I wanted to take a little bit of time and walk through my presentation so that everybody could still hear it and I could still introduce Articulate to as many people as possible and say that I missed everybody because I was definitely looking forward to the conference. So, like I said, my name is Caleb Keller. I'm the system design lead for Samtec's Smart Platform Group. I was going to give a talk about designing a graphical interface for multi-label classification. Before I get into that, I wanted to give a little bit of information about Samtec, which is our mothership or benefactor. They're the company that we work under, and a lot of times whenever we're doing work, we're doing it for them as kind of like a test bed. So Samtec is a customer-first connector company. They design, develop, and manufacture connectors. They wouldn't necessarily manufacture your iPhone, but they might manufacture some of the components inside of your iPhone. I'm going to call it a medium-sized manufacturing company. They ship about 3 million parts per day. We're coming up on $1 billion a year in revenue, and we have crazily customizable products. If you actually counted every possible permutation of a product in our parts catalog, you'd come up with more than 1 trillion combinations. Thankfully, in reality, it's a smaller number that actually get ordered, but it's still pretty crazy. Probably the most important thing to know about Samtec is that we're not a data first or a data native company. So we're not a Google, we're not a Facebook, and all of our systems internally are homegrown. So we're struggling to keep up the pace with app dev and then data insights and business intelligence and big data and everything all at once. So that's a little bit about Samtec. So we build chatbots for internal enterprise use. This isn't all our team does, but it's one of the big things that we do. And saying that we build chatbots for internal enterprise use, I think puts us in a pretty unique box. We aren't building chatbots for lead generation, sales, customer service, or anything like that. We're building chatbots for internal use, like looking up metrics and knowledge and documents inside of the enterprise to try to make an employee's job a little bit easier. So whenever we build these agents, kind of wanted to walk through what the status quo is and certainly how we got started. We started on API.ai or Dialogflow. And in Dialogflow, I think this screen's probably familiar to a lot of people. You create an intent. In this case, it's an order pizza intent. You can do a bunch of stuff to it, but the core meat of it is that you provide these training phrases or utterances to teach your agent how to respond or when to choose that particular intent. You can do slots and whatever else, and then eventually you get to fulfillment. But the key thing to know is that you create an intent and you add sayings to it. So here is AWS Lex. It's the same thing. I've got an order flowers intent, and I'm adding utterances to it. Create intent, add sayings to it. And then here is Microsoft Luis, where I've got a slightly more complicated intent name, but in the end, it's the exact same thing. I'm adding some training data to that intent. And this works great. And we were able to build some really phenomenal agents on top of Dialogflow, and we were really impressed with the functionality that it offered. But the core process still ended up being you create an intent and you add some sayings. And this falls short in a few places whenever you're trying to handle how people actually talk to an agent or a chatbot rather than kind of the idealized sense. So a really token example is, hello, can I get a pizza? Whenever you see this phrase come in, you can do a few things. You can try to say, I'm only going to answer the hello. I'm going to train that as part of a greet. I'm going to train, can I get a pizza as part of order pizza? But it has to be one or the other. You could do some fancy processing to split on the comma, but that can be fairly problematic depending on how you want to do it. You could also train hello as an entity rather than an intent. And there are all sorts of creative ways to come up to solve this problem and respond fairly appropriately, right? And really, if somebody says, hello, can I get a pizza? And you ignore the hello and you just reply with, sure, what toppings would you like? That's not a bad response, but it's not necessarily the most natural or friendly either. So a slightly more advanced example that we see in the internal chatbots that we build would be a request for 2 separate KPIs or 2 separate metrics at once. What were the bookings and cancellations for yesterday? And in this case, I have an API endpoint that returns bookings, and I have a different API endpoint that returns cancellations. So if I wanted to do this, I would probably be writing middleware. I would train an intent that says bookings and cancellations together, and I would write middleware that stood between my agent and those two APIs that called both of them and compiled a result and sent it back, right? So there's kind of a separation of concerns problem in this utterance that makes it a little bit more difficult to handle in tools like Dialogflow today. So we got really excited whenever Rasa posted this blog post many, many months ago called Supervised Word Vectors from Scratch. So the blog post isn't about these special intents at all. It's actually about using the TensorFlow pipeline and being able to train your own word vectors, which is really great, especially in kind of obscure domains where the spacey models might not have heard of the words that you're trying to use. But we got excited whenever we were reading about something in that blog post called hierarchical intents. And the concept was that you could have a phrase like, hey, how are you? I don't really care. And you could tag that, or you could give it two intents instead of just one intent. And Rasa internally splits those two. It doesn't treat them as one. It splits those two and still does some fancy processing, some machine learning on top of them. So there's a few other examples, and the QR code is if you want to go and read the blog post yourself. It's definitely worth a read. So now that we know that we can give a saying two intents, we had to come up with a way that what it would look like, because in the current system where you create an intent and you add a saying to it, that doesn't really foster the ability to give that intent or give that saying a second intent or a third or a fourth or a fifth. So we needed to come up with a new user interface. So this is Articulate. It's the open source chatbot platform that my team supports, and we're really proud of everything that we've been able to accomplish with it recently. So it has a saying section and a chat section to where you can kind of test out your agent. But really the key meat of what I'm trying to show off is, in this case, we're adding sayings to the agent, not to an intent. And then we're tagging those sayings with intents. We actually call them actions. So you create a saying first, and then you tag it with appropriate actions. And then inside of that action is where you define the slots and the webhooks, the fulfillment, and some of the context pieces, right? So it's a change in process. So once you've done that, you can ask a request like, hey, I want a pizza. You can make a request like, hey, I want a pizza, and get a response, hello, replying to the hey, and what toppings would you like on your pizza, replying to the second piece of it, right? So another real quick example that's slightly less token is this concept of booking a flight or booking a vacation, really. If a person's booking a vacation, they might want just a flight, a car, or a hotel, or all three in once. And even if they don't necessarily want a car, you probably want to ask them if they have a car. So in this case, if somebody makes a request specifically for a hotel, like I need a hotel in New York City, you're only going to go after that book hotel action. Same thing for car or flight. But if they say, I'm flying to New York City and I need a flight, a hotel, and a car, you could actually tag it with all three of those actions and kick them off, and Articulate will work through them one at a time to get all of the slots filled and all of the questions answered. That might not be the most realistic way to expect a user to say it, so probably they're just going to say, I want to book a vacation to Chicago. And you know that if they make that request, you need to check and see if they need a flight, a hotel, and a car, and at any point in time they can say no to one of those and kind of break away from it, but you'll at least cover all the pieces that they do need. Okay, so that's a quick introduction to how Articulate uses the hierarchical intents in the TensorFlow pipeline to allow a user to tag a saying with multiple actions. And we'd love for you to give it a spin. It's easy, it's open source. You can clone or download the repo. Once you've done that, you just Docker compose up and you should have everything running. This is a QR code to the repo, so you can use that to get there to clone or download really fast. And since I'm not in person, I can't ask the audience for questions, but I'll be happy to pay attention to both the YouTube video, the Medium blog post if I do one, and then I think you can probably pretty easily find links to our Discord and Gitter or my email address. If you have any questions, definitely welcome them. And if you're having any problems with Articulate, feel free to create an issue on the repo, and we would be happy to help. I hope you do give Articulate a try, and thanks for using Rasa. I'm a longtime Rasa user, and I love it. I love the community, and I really do miss that I wasn't able to be there with you guys. So thanks. Bye.